Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Eddie Aruza. Well, we're in the home stretch. Election Day is fast approaching, and the first of three groups of mayoral candidates squared off right here last night.
4 of the 14 candidates in the race for mayor battled to rise above the rest.
But if we don't establish trust in our communities to work with the police, to feel like when you interact with them, they're people who are there to protect you and help and serve you, then we're not going to have anything.
2 more forums with the remaining candidates follow next week on Channel 11. Convicted ex-Chicago cop Jason Van Dyke beaten up in a Connecticut prison. His wife demands answers. Meanwhile, Illinois' new AG and the special prosecutor in the Van Dyke case challenged the ex-cop's 81-month sentence.
It is my constitutional duty to get involved.
R. Kelly to be indicted? That's the report after another video allegedly surfaces showing the R&B superstar with an underage girl. Meantime, Chicago police question 2 persons of interest in the alleged attack on Empire star Jussie Smollett as the actor fires back at doubters.
Like, how do you not believe that? It's the truth.
A crack in the roadway. Lakeshore Drive shut down for more than a day as Chicago infrastructure woes begin to surface. Amazon pulls out of New York City following opposition to its HQ too. Chicago and Illinois pounce on the online retail giant to reconsider moving here. And in sports, the Cubs organization raising eyebrows off the field as they strike a deal with a conservative broadcaster. While across town on the ice, don't count out the Blackhawks just yet. Patrick Kane among the hotshots keeping the team's playoff dreams alive.
Joining us tonight are Mariano Gielis of Univision, Mary Wisniewski of the Chicago Tribune, Alden Lowry of WBEZ, and Nancy Armour of USA Today. Thank you all very much for being here, and I don't know if you can tell, but 24 hours ago, 4 candidates for mayor were sitting in the very seats that you are sitting in right now. Mariano Gielis, as I mentioned, we're in the home stretch at this point, yes, and the Tribune and Crain's Chicago have both said that their choice for mayor is Bill Daley. What is your reaction to that?
I'm kind of surprised. I wasn't expecting the Tribune, to tell you the truth, to endorse Daley because, I mean, that last name, no? You would have think that they would have looked somewhere else to put their trust, but it seems that if it's not someone that has a big name or a huge personality, no one can govern the city of Chicago. So I think that they applied that fear to their decision, and that's why they picked Daley.
But it's also, as you mentioned, the name of a dynasty here in Chicago. And Mary Wisniewski, I know you're not on the editorial board yet at your publication, but what is your reaction to your paper endorsing Bill Daley?
We're separated, reporters and editorial, but I was not surprised because the Chicago Tribune is a conservative paper and Daley is a conservative choice. Even though he's a Democrat, he's someone who's been in government for a long time. He looks like a banker. He has been a banker. He's a money guy. He's supported by moneyed interests. So I don't think it's a surprise that the Tribune would go and Crain's would go for someone like that.
And that is essentially what both the Tribune and Crain's are saying in terms of their endorsements of Bill Daley, is that this city needs a banker, finance, money guy like Bill Daley to tackle the enormous financial crises that are affecting this city. It kind of juxtaposes against the latest poll showing that Tony Preckwinkle, this is a Telemundo, sorry, it's your competition, NBC5 poll. Tony Preckwinkle leads the pack just barely with 14%, followed by Bill Daley at 13%. Then Susana Mendoza, Lori Lightfoot, Gary Chico, and Amara Enya fill out the top 6 spots there. Alden Lowry, is Bill Daley the person you think will lead this city to financial solid ground?
My guess is that Bill Daley will continue leading the city, if he were to be elected mayor, would continue leading the city in a direction that it's been moving in. And that business perspective, I think we've seen that with the current mayor over the past 8 years, and that's been good for business, it's been good for downtown, but you can make a very strong argument that it hasn't been very good for everyone else. And I think Bill Daley would likely be a continuation of that. And those endorsements, I think, give people a good sign of where most people expect his policies and where the city would be under his leadership.
It would seem that with all of the scandals that are rattling City Hall at the moment, the push would be for change in terms of throwing out the old way of doing things, the Chicago way of doing things, and moving forward. I don't know if Bill Daley represents that, if he is separate from his brother and his father's policies, if he's bringing a different perspective and a different approach. But Nancy Armour, as an observer of all of this, what is your take?
I thought it was interesting in the Tribune editorial, they made the point that if his last name wasn't Daley, there would be a much different perception of him because of the business connections, because he's not tied to Madigan or Burke. And so do you need to look at it and say, taking the name away, is he the best person for the city? But then can you actually divorce him from his family? I'm surprised at those poll results because I kind of thought that all of the scandal with Burke and Madigan would drag Preckwinkle down more, and that hasn't seemed to be the case. And I don't know if that's just the name recognition or Chicago politics as usual.
Alden, are you surprised that Tony Preckwinkle is leading in this particular poll and that Susana Mendoza is coming in third, actually moving up in the polls numbers, considering their ties to Ed Burke and Mike Madigan and the numerous scandals that have really kind of impacted them as well?
No, not so much. I mean, those are certainly things that people should be concerned about and should ask questions about. But Tony Preckwinkle has built, I think, a very solid foundation, particularly among progressive liberals here in Chicago who still believe in her. She's, of course, been a very, I would say, loyal member of the Democratic Party as a power broker, and I think that's perhaps the most challenging thing about her candidacy. But on policy issues, a lot of what Tony Preckwinkle has talked about and put in place are things that people, I think, feel very strongly about. I think that's the reason why you see her. But keep in mind, she's not very far ahead of the pack. So those things certainly are.
They're barely squeaking by in the low teens. But one of the things that has been brought up in these endorsements is that, and surprisingly Tony Preckwinkle has not been endorsed, is that her ties to Joe Barrios maybe weighed her down. Not just the scandals related to Ed Burke and accepting money from him and hiring his son. Is that something that you think that Chicagoans care about at this point?
I think some Chicagoans pay attention to that. The Tribune did a lot of stories about the problems with property taxes under Barrios, but I think that the Preckwinkle has a strength, and then she can kind of play it both ways. People know her as a boss. She's been in the party for a long time. She knows how to play the power game. She knows how to get things done, but she's also been known as a progressive. She's also been known as a reformer, and I think her ads are really, really impressive, and they're everywhere. You can barely go on a web page without seeing an ad showing Tony Preckwinkle in a grade school, leaning over a smiling child. So I think she's able to play things both ways, and I think that's what keeps her strong.
Yeah, and she has this other advantage. Given those numbers, the big question right now is what the turnout is going to be on the 26th. And we know that the candidates that have the support of the unions are going to have huge turnouts, and in this case, she has all that advantage.
In this poll, the largest number of undecideds are black voters at 24% and Hispanic voters at 22%. The Latino community, what has been the reaction to all of these scandals? Not just Mendoza, but involving Danny Solis, who has disappeared. Do you have any idea where he might be?
Not at all. And it pains me to say that it's indifference, the reaction. Maybe because of we come from countries that have these type of problems forever and people are used to those problems. Or maybe because of lack of information. Maybe they don't watch Univision enough. So the point here is that,
that's
for example,
plug, by the way.
Yes. Last week I was at this forum that was organized by the Logan Square Neighborhood Association. They had like 15 candidates for aldermanic positions. And between those candidates, there were Moreno from the first district, from the first ward, Alderman Moreno, and Alderman Maldonado from the 26th. And those two are in the recordings, in the Solis recordings. So I asked people, do you care about these issues? People don't care at all about them. People care about the policies they are bringing to the table.
But the question is, will they decide and will they come out and vote as the Latino community in this town grows and has more political say? Is the community using that power?
If you compare it to probably, in the early voting, I can tell you that they haven't come out. And if they are not decided and waiting to the 26th, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but I still don't think that they are going to come out in big numbers.
Alden, do you think that there is indifference among the African American community here in terms of this election, or are they seriously? Is there just too much to absorb in terms of who might be best for the community in terms of the next leadership?
I think there are certainly questions about which of these candidates would be perhaps the most responsive to the needs of Black Chicago. But there's a great deal of apathy, but there's a great deal of frustration and just exhaustion. I mean, this has been a very hard city to be Black, and especially to be Black and to be low income.
And the exodus out of the city is
an
the largest in the
illustration
African
of
American
that frustration, with no doubt. So many people have unplugged. They're doing the best they can to make it, and whatever happens in the political arena, it's fine. It doesn't seem to have made much of a difference in the eyes of many in Black Chicago. So the fact that there's so many undecided voters, I think, is a function of that. The fact that among the three big demographic pillars in Chicago, Black wards had the lowest turnout in the 2015 election is also an illustration of that.
Let's turn to Springfield for just a moment, because there is some activity happening there while we're concentrating on Chicago. This week, the governor signed the bill that would raise the minimum wage in Illinois to $15 an hour. That's not coming until 2025, so it'll be about $1 an hour over the next 6 years or so. In terms of the business community, as we approach this election, the naysayers say this is not going to help the small businesses. This is going to take business away. This is going to hurt these individuals as much as it is businesses. Mary Wisniewski, do you agree?
I know that the evidence from other states which already have higher minimum wages say no, that the businesses survive and the people who work for them are able to spend some money and put that money into the economy. So
the question is, by 2025, is $15 an hour going to be a living wage?
It might not be, but I think that this is one of the things that the reformers promised, and they delivered on it. And the businesses that are complaining about it should look at the evidence from other places.
And also, too, the evidence from when Illinois or Chicago has had previous hikes in minimum wage. We've heard similar complaints or fears, and that hasn't proved to be true. So why would it be?
And the fact that it's going to be gradually raised over the next 6 years. Mariano, the governor is expected to give, or will be giving, his budget address later this week, and he is somewhat surprised at the depth of the financial crisis in this state. So what do you anticipate from that speech?
I anticipate that he's going to be talking about raising revenue whichever way possible, because that's the only way to cope with all this crisis we have. And he's going to be pressuring the legislator to pass the recreational marijuana bill and more betting, more gaming in the city and the state. So it's going to be probably focus on revenue, and I think that's a wise decision.
Well, revenue may be from sources that actually generate revenue, but what about taxes? Do you think that taxes will have to be increased again in some form, Alden Lowry?
I don't see how we avoid it. I mean, if the governor wants to do some of the things that he's talked about, I mean, gaming and marijuana is one thing, but he's also talked about a progressive income tax. I would be surprised if he doesn't mention that. I don't know if he'll actually get it, or at least get it right away. But that, to me, I think would be probably the plum in terms of generating revenue that he's going to go for.
Reform the Constitution for that. So even if he mentions it, it's going to take another year and a half for sure.
Yeah. I'm guessing it'll be the lead in his speech, though.
It will be the lead in his speech,
Just
you
guessing,
think?
yeah. The
He's not going to bury that
tax.
part of it.
Right, yeah. And he should have known already how bad the state's troubles get.
What has he lived in the last 4 years?
It must be worse than we all think it is.
Well, maybe there will be a lot of surprises this week. Let's turn to some of the other big headlines of the week. Convicted Chicago cop Jason Van Dyke beaten up at a Connecticut prison. His wife and attorneys demand answers. While Illinois' new attorney general joins the Van Dyke special prosecutor in challenging the ex-cop's 81-month sentence. R. Kelly to be indicted, according to a report by music journalist Jim DeRogatis. A curious turn in the Jussie Smollett attack investigation as police questioned the Empire star and two persons of interest. Was it all staged? And a steel beam cracks on Lakeshore Drive, closing a part of the roadway and revealing Chicago's infrastructure vulnerabilities. Let me begin with the Jussie Smollett story, because really that's the freshest, and that's the one that continues to be developing today. In terms of the two individuals that were seen on the surveillance camera, they identified them and they called them in for questioning. They're not suspects, they're persons of interest, but they also called in Jussie Smollett. And there were reports initially that this might have all been a hoax. What do you make of all of this, Alden Lowry? Do you think that they really could have staged this?
I'm not sure what's a thing. This thing has flipped and changed. I thought Smollett was actually very convincing in his Good
When you
Morning
talked to Robin
America
Roberts?
interview. And the thing that really struck out to me was that he talked about how damaging it would be for his community to make this up. And so
And he's talking LGBT community as well as African American community.
Exactly. He's particularly been a strong voice within the LGBTQ community. And talked about how these attacks happen very often to members of that community and how much of a disservice it would be. So to say that on national television in the midst of a big hoax, elaborate hoax like this, I find really hard to think. But certainly there are a number of things to be skeptical of when you look at the details
Well,
of this
the police came out right away after one of those reports aired that it might have been staged and said, no, whoever your sources are misinformed. This is not right now where we're headed. But it has been an odd case from the start, hasn't it, Mary?
It has been, because the police have said that he's believable, and he is convincing, but he's also a very good actor. You know, that's his job. And he wasn't willing to give up all of his phone records, and then the phone records he gave up, the police said were not enough for them to be really useful. The two guys that were identified, and he said, yeah, I think we're getting somewhere now that we've identified these guys, turn out to be brothers who are black, and one of them is connected to the show in some way. So it's a very strange case, and I'm just waiting for all the facts to come in.
Not only that, it also happened in Streeterville, one of the most monitorized places in the city of Chicago, and there's no camera that caught the incident. So I think part of the doubt comes from that.
The lingering aspect of this also is whether he's telling the truth or whether it was fabricated, is that outside of Chicago, it made the city seem like there is rampant racism, especially what he described of a noose around his head was particularly damning and damaging to the city, which already has this violence, perception of its violence. So, Nancy, what do you think, if this turns out to be a hoax, is going to be the implication?
There's so many, because, as you mentioned, yes, this fed into all of the stereotypes we hear about Chicago just being this lawless place. But the thing that really strikes me and concerns me is how damaging it would be to the African American community and the LGBTQ community, and the merging of those two, because those people are already more marginalized than other members of the LGBT community. Mm-hmm. So I hope it's not a hoax, just because of the damage that it could do.
And that they find they find who did it, if it is true. In terms of Jason Van Dyke, who seems to continue being in the news, partly because of being beaten up at this prison in Connecticut. He was transferred. Nobody knew that he was transferred, apparently, maybe not even his wife, until a couple of days after he was there. But now the push to overturn essentially the sentence of 81 months. Do you think that the Attorney General Kwame Raoul and the Special Prosecutor McMahon will succeed?
It's a great question. I mean, it all depends on the Supreme Court, if they're going to take the case, if they're going to hear it, they're going to make a decision on the point of which was the type of sentence that the judge applied regarding the type of charges that this guy was facing. And if you remember, during the closing arguments, the main discussion was what's the base? I mean, the 16 charges for each of the shots, or the second-degree murder. So when the judge decided for a second-degree murder, he opened the door to this type of rebuttal. So that's what we're going to have.
And it's going to proceed, apparently, but we'll have to see whether they succeed. Let me touch quickly on Lakeshore Drive, because as the transportation reporter for the Chicago Tribune, you were there. Is this a symptom of the vulnerabilities in our infrastructure in this city, and as the state tries to maybe revive a capital bill after 10 years? Absolutely.
This is Exhibit A for why we need infrastructure improvements. There are 400 bridges in the 6-county area that are deemed structurally deficient because they have some kind of problem. They need maintenance, they need repair. Some really bad bridges along I-80 in Will County, which is a big truck route. And this bridge that cracked on Lakeshore Drive wasn't even a bad bridge. It wasn't on that list. But you see, and some of this is coming from the effects of climate change, because we have these very extreme temperature swings from -23 53 to 51, which caused damage to this deal. So I think we're going to be seeing more and more problems.
And the fact that these bridges aren't inspected every year, they're inspected every 2 years, and some of these are aging rapidly, it's all contributing to the flaws. And do you expect to see more? Do you think that that's going to happen?
They're already planning to do some spot inspections on bridges that have a similar design. They're planning those within the next few weeks.
Is anybody going to pay the political price of all this? Because I haven't heard any politician say, okay, yeah, it might be me, and I'm going to try to make
it might
this
be
happen.
drivers, because we are talking about a gas tax increase.
Yeah, there
Mayor
you go.
Emanuel has talked about that, and the suburban leaders too.
Well, and there's all kinds of other taxes of people that drive into the city, and the suburban tax of people that come in from the suburbs. So
Still gonna be an issue.
we'll see if any of those materialize. Let's get to sports. The Cubs team up with a broadcaster that's been criticized for its conservative slant. Meanwhile, the team continues to play public relations cleanup for Joe Ricketts' prejudicial emails. The Blackhawks are staying alive as they rally for a playoff spot. Will Manny Machado ever make it to the White Sox? His glove for this season may give us clues. Well, Nancy Armour, let's begin with what's happening over at Wrigley Field, which has nothing to do with the players or spring training or what's happening on the field, but the apology tour that the Ricketts children are doing for their father. And then they reach this deal with Sinclair Broadcasting. Give me your opinion on all of this.
Well,
and what its implications for the team.
The timing of the deal couldn't be worse, because you do have the conservative broadcasting. Half of the Ricketts family is very involved in conservative politics. The dad's emails are just horrific. But you have one of the sons who is, I believe he's the financial chairman of Trump's reelection campaign. I mean, they're in deep in conservative politics. And the emails and now the deal just kind of highlights that. From a business standpoint, and they made this point, Crane County made this point yesterday, that Fox's politics, Fox News politics, don't bleed over into Fox, their NFL coverage or their SEC coverage. And I would expect that you would see the same thing with the Sinclair broadcasting. But it's, like I said, the timing of it probably could not be worse for the team.
And they are doing outreach to the Muslim community following Joe Ricketts' emails. Alden, do you think that is going to go a long way in healing these comments that he made?
I mean, I think in the short term it certainly helps, and I think Tom Ricketts and the Cubs generally have responded well in trying to draw a line between them. But the wound that Joe Ricketts cut with those emails is going to go deep, and it's going to be lasting. I don't think people are going to forget this, but I do think the Cubs have been responsible in their reaction to it.
But this also means that this is the end of free televised games in the when we're talking about the deal with Sinclair.
Yep.
Again, there's a lot of Cubs fans out there that I'm seeing on Twitter. I think Mary might be one of them.
I've been
that
a
says,
Cubs fan since I was a little girl, and I'm thinking of adding some black and white to my summer uniform this summer.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. So what do you think that's going to mean?
This is a continuing trend in sports. We saw it with the Big Ten, was really the one who got it started with the Big Ten network. The Dodgers have done this with their games, which has not gone well because they've not been able to get some of the cable carriers to carry their channel. Sinclair's a little bigger because it's got the tennis channel. So we'll see. But the Cubs have such a broad national following that if there's any team that can make this work, it's probably them.
Let's turn to Manny Machado's black and white rolling gloves and what that might mean. What do you think?
That's where we've come to. We've been taking signs from batting gloves and hats and batting cages. Listen, I think everybody assumes and thinks that Manny Machado is going to be on the White Sox, given all of the different ties, all of the different signs. It's just a question of how big is the deal going to be, how long is it going to be, and when is it going to be signed? And, we've seen this with all of the free agents, that there's just been a huge slowdown. But now that pitchers and catchers have reported, I think we'll see things start to pick up.
Well, speaking of high-profile free agents, the Cubs didn't land Machado. They didn't land Bryce Harper. They're keeping Cole Hamels. Is this a smart move because it's cost-effective?
I don't necessarily think that they needed to add Machado or Harper. They have the pieces there that they need. Their big question to me, and it was the same thing last year, is pitching. Should they have gone out and gotten another high-profile starter or somebody for the bullpen? I think you could make that argument. But I never really thought that Harper or Machado was a realistic get for either.
And the report is that Chatwood is doing pretty good.
Yes. Yeah, but it is, I mean, it's early, so we'll see.
And the Blackhawks, they won last night, but yeah, you're shocked?
I mean, I think I and everybody else wrote them off for dead about 2 months ago, and now all of a sudden they're 3 points out of the wild card
Well,
spot.
they're showing you, aren't they?
They're showing everybody, yes.
Do you think that they'll make it to the playoffs?
They could. I think they've got a fairly favorable schedule. And, you know, one thing, especially at this time of the year, if you get on a hot streak, you know, that confidence kind of tends to build. And, you know, they bounced back from that one loss last night with a pretty impressive showing. So we'll see.
All right, let me ask you something else, but let me say thank you, because we're out of time, to Mariano Gielis, Mary Wisniewski, Alden Lowry, and Nancy Armour. And we're going to continue this conversation online in our web extra video. We'll see you on the next edition of the Week in Review. I'm Eddie Aruza. Good night. And who is going to make it for the Blackhawks if they make it into the postseason?
Well, and I think you've seen it the last couple of games, Patrick Kane.
Yeah,
you know,
he's
been great,
and
he really is. And you need either him or Taves to carry that team, and Kane has really stepped it up.
Yeah.
So they're going to go as far as he can carry him.
Let's turn to a completely different sport. Lindsey Vonn is retiring. What's her legacy going to be?
She's, in my mind, as of right now, she's the greatest ski racer that the U.S. has ever had, and certainly one of the greatest that the sport has ever seen. I mean, what she has done, particularly through the injuries, is incredible. It's really, really amazing.
So her legacy is going to be very strong, and she's going to be remembered
and
for her endurance.
For her endurance. And
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, proud sponsors of the National Hellenic Museum's Trial of Hippocrates on February 20th, where Robert Clifford will be participating in the open to the public mock trial.